It begins with the essential reprints, then making notes issue by issue, then pointlessly converting into a Word document. I really should have started here. Now finally creating spreadsheets and diagrams that mathematically quantify Peter Parker's arc, so there's no cherry picking the evidence. Every example and points made in these retrospective essays are representative of broader patterns and trends. So this is the general mood of the first act of Stan Lee's Spider-Man run. With Steve Ditko, it's 30 issues of a high school and workplace sitcom. This is the mood of the second act with John Romita Sr. It's effectively a teen rom-com about a flirty, handsome man living his best years with good friends, with a few more turbulent ups and downs. But here it is at the final act. Everything goes to hell, people die, love is lost, and if Spider-Man swings over a chimney, he might be sprayed with soot. It's a love story, but more explicitly, it's misery porn. Welcome to Spider-Man in Hell.
Suddenly, the world I used to know, I see it differently. You woke me from a dream, now here's reality. Baby, baby, you are really hurting me. 'Cause every time you tell me.
Despite the low points in Peter Parker's life, the first 70 issues had built a pretty good case for how Spider-Man made him a better person. He went from threatening his bullies to inspiring them. Most of the problems Spider-Man caused for Peter would also be solved by him, like when he went missing due to memory loss, and Peter's alibi was that the amnesiac Spider-Man kidnapped him. However, after No More, Peter's renewed resolve turns him into a different guy, whose previous confidence has morphed into a more intense form of his pre-existing self-destructive volatility, and his humility is traded with rage-filled impotence. In fact, anger now serves as one of the main textures within this section, as Stan's politics become more prevalent. The most explicit example is the introduction of Randy Robertson, Robbie's son, a socially conscious kid who's mad at the establishment. On one hand, he symbolizes the overarching themes of stigma with young people. Since the very beginning, even in Amazing Fantasy 15, almost every adult are assholes who unfairly misjudge the young, and it's this very misjudgment that often leads to horrifying consequences and conflict. And on the other hand, Randy spotlights the increasing narrowness of Peter Parker's disposition, because as much as he fights criminals and helps people, he's not very invested with people. His new whatever the world thinks cure has become poison, whereby issue 69, yeah, shut up. After being shot at by a cop after trying to return a stolen tablet, Spider-Man declares, "Okay then, if that's how they want it, I'm through being a public fall guy. From now on, it's Spidey against the world. If they call me a menace and treat me like a menace, I might as well be a menace." My tongue is all weird. From, "Oh no, I'm scared of being judged," to "maybe everyone else is right, maybe I am an asshole," to now, "Fuck you, I am the bad guy then." This is beyond cathartic. However, the resulting blowout results in Peter Parker finally grabbing JJ and causing him to faint, making him enemy number one. As a result, Peter finally sees the errors of his angry ways, and nah, he just gets more pissed. When Flash flirts with Gwen in front of him, he yells, "Look, Thompson, if you're trying to put me down in front of my own girl." "Peter, stop it, what's gone into you? Flash was only kidding the way he used to." "So no, Subsequently, Gwen is then forced to defend Peter on the basis that he needs help, not hostility. These issues is one of the reasons why I find it deeply confusing when people say Peter Parker is supposed to be shy and awkward. Not only was he not that before he got his powers, in fact it was quite important that he wasn't, but he's especially none of those things now. He's a happy-go-lucky dude who you can have a good laugh with, but he's also extremely volatile and will fucking pick you up by the throat on a bad day. Like when he thought Flash was sleeping with Gwen. Hell, when Harry threatened to kick Peter Parker out of their apartment, he was like, "Fine then, you too, man." What makes Peter Parker such a complex character is rooted in the fact that he has a very realistic range. He's not a guy who will just let people walk all over him. Instead, he's like you and me. He'll get angry, he'll be petty, and he won't be able to help himself falling into a cycle of mistakes after he reaches some confidence from his successes. So how do you confront his volatility? You give him a mirror. I've been around supervillains so long that I don't trust anyone anymore. Spider-Man has made Peter Parker extremely lonely, and not in that laughing at his own little world way from high school. So one way to reflect upon his experiences is with a kid who's on a similar path but hasn't changed yet. Hobie Brown, Earth 616's Prowler. Aaron Davis originated from the Ultimate Comics. A window cleaner. Like Peter Parker, he's got girl troubles, is poorly paid and neglected by his boss, although his is also a racist. Therefore, he builds a supersuit to become a criminal because it's convenient. Hobie doesn't want to hurt anyone, he just wants money and is alright with robbing from the establishment, namely JJ, which technically you could argue Peter Parker does the same. But when he thought he killed Peter Parker, he solves his existential crisis by deluding himself with more aggression. As a result, when Spider-Man beats him, he sees him as a mirror and lets him go. He's no hardened baddie, he's just a frightened kid, no older than I am. Maybe it's just as well you caught me before I get into more trouble. Why'd I pick an older voice for Hobie? And that's it. All I wanted was a chance to use my talents to help people, but no one listened. No one cared. That's always been the trouble, no one ever cares. It makes plenty of difference, Hobie. So far you've hurt no one. You've stolen nothing. So who am I to turn you in? Go on back to Mindy, man. That's where it's really at. You mean? I mean, maybe we were both in the same boat. Both of us riding a rocket to nowhere. Only you were the lucky one. Because you just got off. Hobie is who Peter Parker started out as. Someone angry over how he was treated. He was out for himself. But this anger led to regret, led to hubris, and now disenchantment, where self-doubt is unescapable because unlike the Raimi films, Spider-Man wasn't an inherited dream, it was a self-created oath. An oath that doesn't just help people, but also scratch a self-centered itch to feel good, rebelling against a machine. This doubt is largely the main source of Peter's anger, because it's what allows him to feel entitled both fairly and unfairly. And it's a paradox that he can't solve. But with Hobie, he can at least see it. Peter Parker still has Gwen, who loves him despite his anger, financial hardships, and they end up spending a night together, not at Flash's party, but on a bench. So what if you also take this away, and every other threshold that kept Peter Parker mentally afloat? On a fairly routine battle of Dark Ark, bricks almost fall and land on a small child, which is averted with the life of George Stacy. Captain Stacy dies, and his very last words are, "Be good to her, son. Be good to her. She loves you so very much." Stacy knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and he was proud of him. Therefore, his death both tears apart Peter's mental stability, but also his legacy keeps him going. A narrative role that I've realized MCU Aunt May basically fulfilled now. The following arc, To Smash the Spider, is my favorite of this whole act, these sort of 30 issues, because like No Way Home, it's so bloody salacious. As everyone mourns, Mr. Bullet, an ultra-conservative campaigning to be DA, takes advantage and launches an anti-Spider-Man campaign. He gets Gwen Stacy and JJ support, while attacks Peter Parker in the streets to get info on Spidey. Although there's a hilarious bit where Spidey gets his revenge and tortures Bullet's goons that were beating him up like he's friggin' Batman. I'll admit it really didn't solve anything, but it sure made me feel better. Bullet is also literally a white supremacist, which Robbie discovers, causing JJ to withdraw his support. Anyone ever tell you you know too much, black man? Shut up! Robbie's gonna have you, Bullet! This is one of those great air-fisting scenes, cause as Robbie replied to his son, JJ may be a petty and rude moron, but he's not a racist. And Robbie is his conscience. Spidey and Iceman then rescue a kidnapped Robbie, while Bullet accidentally outs himself publicly. He effectively cathartically represents the most extreme avatar of the old establishment, and by turning Spider-Man into a feared public villain, it contributes in cleansing Peter Parker's soul of his anger. But unfortunately, it doesn't stop it from turning into despair now. Gwen still hates Spider-Man, and because of that, Peter Parker can't ask her to stay, so she leaves for London. Harry is also gone for a while due to his drug problems, and Peter loses his job opportunity with Norman due to the return of the Green Goblin. But then 4 issues later, Gwen comes back after she realized her hatred for Spider-Man overpowered her love for Peter, ending on the words, "Who says we never give Spidey a happy ending?" Literally the last 25 issues, Stan. Leading to issue 99, which I consider the proper ending of Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, John Romita and Gil Kane's run. Panic in prison. Peter prepares to propose to Gwen, but realizes he needs a job first. So he takes his new big balls to force JJ to give him a staff job when he's under the pressure of getting pictures during a prison break. Spidey stops it and allows a reform to happen to improve prison conditions. He then gets invited on TV and makes a big speech about the prison situation, which serves as a grand metaphor for the themes told within the entirety of the prior 99 issues. I'm talking about conditions where young first offenders are put in the same cells with hardened criminals, about an antiquated system that makes prisons breeding grounds for crime. I'm talking about men who stay locked up for months, waiting for trial because there aren't enough judges, not enough courts. Crime and justice are everyone's problem, and it's a problem that must be solved before it's too late. Peter then returns to Gwen saddened that he can't take her out, because he doesn't get paid until Friday, but she's still happy because she already had made him dinner. The final words are, "Parker, you may have been a loser before, but it looks like you finally did something." As the sunset is the Spider-Man mask. As a result, as the third act of this run, which is defined by the hero coming home as a new man and struggling to hold on to their newfounded wisdom, all of these issues of pain and hell are effectively used to see what's left in Peter once there's enough distance from him and the effectiveness of his lessons, if his life is a circle or a line of improvement. But regardless, Peter has grown, the storm has passed. But there's still the very final issue. The final story before Roy Thomas comes in for a bit, the Spider or the Man. Peter decides to take away his powers to be with Gwen, so he creates a cure which causes him to dream. He remembers Uncle Ben, for like the 10th time in the entirety of the run, losing Betty to Ned, George Stacy's death, who all signify regret. Peter then fights his enemies, who all represent different self-doubts that he's been struggling with. They all ask questions Peter can't answer. But in the sky, Captain Stacy appears to reassure Peter that being Spider-Man is both a blessing and a curse, a duality that doesn't represent selfishness or a form of self-punishment, but was and always will be a form of self-therapy. Peter then wakes up with more arms now, and that leads into the next stuff with Morbius. This issue isn't really necessary within the grand story in terms of progress, outside of it summarizing all the themes the reader should have noticed and provide connective tissue for what's next, so it's alright. But in conclusion, these issues are the same problems Peter faced during Spider-Man No More, but blown on a bigger scale. However, as things got worse, Spider-Man is unconsciously better. He'll bitch and moan, but that's not going to stop him from carrying on. His self-doubt may poison him, but deep down inside, Captain Stacy's death gave him the antibodies, and so did the victories of every other battle. Peter may think his life is over, but people are always going to be there for him. The misery porn side of Peter is often what loads of people define the character by, but in the character's original publicized run, it wasn't permanent or even that long. It was a momentary test to see if Spider-Man has internalized all his development, so even if he denounces his own desire to be responsible or lose everything, his very core being can't undo or unlearn his growth. Therefore, he can't help but to rise from everything with greater recognition of himself. These Spider-Man comics reminds us that he's emotionally challenging because he embodies such a holistic image of concerns about being young, problems with the self, problems with the world that's shaping you, and problems with the mirrors we're all looking for. Spider-Man is about a search for the reflection, and he shows us that the mirror is within ourselves. What a pretentious way to end this essay.
15, you needed to calm down. You listened as it all came undone. Oh, 15, you don't have to be.
So this is the end of the Stan Lee Spider-Man retrospective. Harry and Gwen were brushed over very quickly because they're going to get their own individual videos. I plan to go through Jerry Conway and Marv Wolfman's run because I own their essential collections. I'm very adamant that these retrospective parts will be all chronological because the purpose is to examine the totality of these stories through a very biographical lens. Hence why I kept referencing where Peter Parker started and how he is now. In a perfect world, I'd love to do every single Spider-Man comic up into even the current Nick Spencer stuff, but realistically, I don't make enough from these videos to be able to do that. So fingers crossed, I'll find the rest at the charity shop for like 49p or something. Anyways, thank you to everyone on Patreon, and I'll see you next video.
The more realistic we make our characters, the more the college kids who read them think that it's satire, which has taught me a very great lesson. The world is so crazy that if you present things the way they really are, it comes across as broad satire. And
Oh, wait a minute, no.
all the sociology and psychology majors can do what they want with that one.
I've gotta take off. I'm so uptight that the slightest remark could make me blow my stack.